Hey everybody, I want to welcome you back to the Landlord launch and our course or our section, our module on the move-in process. So last time we were here, we just wrapped up getting kind of taking a deep dive into a sample lease agreement. And in this session here, we are going to take a look at some of the lease addendums that I like to use as part of my standard move-in package. And like our first one we're going to touch here is the animal responsibility agreement. Yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to get through these. We're going to jump in. We're going to take a deep dive into these and talk about some of the provisions in there, why they're important, things along those lines. So let's just get started here. So the first one we are looking at today is the animal responsibility agreement. So I started doing my best trying to change the habit of my verbiage instead of saying things along using the term pets, using more animals, especially with all like the service animal and assistance animals and the ESAs and all that stuff. Really trying to get myself in the habit of using animal instead of pet. So I use, instead of a pet lease, it's using an animal responsibility agreement. You can call it an animal lease, you can call it an animal addendum, whatever it is. But the point of it is to give the tenant permission and outline the terms of having an animal in the home. Now, I like this form. Let me just pull it over here. All right, so I like this form because I can use it for both pets and animals that are ESAs or service animals, things along those lines. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that yes, service animals, ESAs are not considered pets. They are medical devices, but it doesn't mean there's not responsibilities there. There's still a responsibility to take care of the animal. There's still a responsibility to identify the animal. Still a responsibility to make sure they have proper vet care, shots are up to date. There's a responsibility to keep the animal under control, make sure they're not a nuisance to neighbors, to other animals. There's still a responsibility to clean up after their waste, still a responsibility to pay for any damages that animal may cause. And if they do not, especially on the ESAs and the service animals, if assistance animals, if they do cause damage and they do that type of stuff, you do have the right to ask them to leave. So what this agreement does is it encompasses all of them. So right at the top here, goes into the term of the agreement, when it's made, who it's made between, tenant and landlord name. Again, reinforces what is stated in the lease. Animals are not allowed without a signed agreement. And I think this is more for adding future animals. It's just reinforcing that idea that, if you're going to have an animal, there's a process we go through here and you have to have an animal. So it doesn't give them unfettered access to bring in. Just because they have an ESA, there's a process there. It doesn't give them the ability to bring in any animal. Doesn't give them the ability to bring in any animal they want at any time. So just laying the guidelines there. So next section here is really talking about the identification of the animal. My cursor out of the way there. So animal's name, the breed of the animal, the weight of the animal, the age, the color, the sex. You could even require a picture, an identification picture of the animal if you would like. And what this does is it makes it very easy to identify. If you do an inspection and they come in with a Chihuahua and that's what's identified, and you go in and there's a Great Dane. And they say, well, you said we can have a pet. Yeah, but this isn't the pet. This isn't the agreement. So it becomes a lease violation is what it does. And so if you allow multiple pets, of course, you can have it on here. Now, this particular agreement does outline what the it does outline what the deposits and pet charges and all that are going to be. So if this is an ESA or a service animal type deal, then all you do is you just put 0 in there, because we can't charge for those types of things. When we go through the vetting process and get all of that, get the ESA letter and so forth, that's fine. But we prepare this animal agreement, the responsibility agreement, and we just don't charge for those because you can't. They're not a pet, so you can't charge animal deposits, you can't charge fees, you can't charge the rents or whatever you're going to do. But it does outline some of the conditions. Must be responsible for cleanup and removal of any fecal waste to the animal. No litter boxes to be kept outside. Aquarium leaks. It's a general type of deal. But if there's certain things that you need to deal with or things you want to include in there, you add it in here. And again, the point is that there are rules and regulations for service animals and ESAs and animals that are treated like pets alike, and they're usually the same. The only difference is we have to make certain exceptions on reasonable accommodations when it comes to the rules. Doesn't mean that we have to make exceptions on their ability to damage and cause chaos and pester other tenants or other animals. And then the other thing I kind of put in here is that agrees to comply with all city and county ordinances. I like that because if a city bans a certain animal, let's just get extreme here and say that somebody has an emotional support Burmese python. Well, if your city bans snakes that are over, 15 foot of length and all certain breeds of pythons, well, they can't force that on you as an ESA because your city or county ordinance it comes from a higher authority and they have banned that, so therefore they cannot. You can deny that as a service animal, and the reason it's in here is because if they get one later on down the line, they've agreed and they understand that that's the case. If it becomes a nuisance, causes damage to the property, the lease can be terminated. You give them your notice, 1430, whatever your lease compliance notice is. Animal will be under control at all times. Again, understands a violation of the provisions of the agreement as a violation of the lease agreement. Agrees to indemnify and hold the owner harmless from any and all liabilities to the property and persons arising directly or indirectly from keeping the animal on above named premises. So a solid agreement. If there are specific things in here that you want to change or add or so forth, it is open to that. Make sure they get the signatures on there. If you want to get pictures, maybe you put a thing in here that you can request a picture at any time with however much notice. But use this to your advantage. It's a solid document when it comes to having an animal in your home. All right, let's see what's next here. The drug-free, crime-free addendum. So I think this is a great document to have. I've used them in Kansas, I've used them in Arizona, and I think pretty much across any state that this is an applicable deal. And it basically allows you as a landlord to ask somebody to leave if they violate certain provisions. And it's usually based around drug-related activity, criminal-related activity, maybe some stalking, things along those lines. But check with your kind of like local. You're going to want to check this against your local area and make sure they're not specific provisions. But this is a good template to start out with. It's in the forms vault. And again, it specifically addresses certain things like drug-related criminal activity, what that is defined as, what section of the Controlled Substance Act that falls under. And it gives you some teeth to get somebody out if they are doing things that are drug-related and certain criminal-related type deals on your property. Especially, I mean, let's just say something like, let's get extreme here and say that there's evidence of methamphetamine manufacturers, or somebody in the household gets arrested for distribution of methamphetamines. Something like that, somebody running a meth lab in your home, if you've never dealt with it, just look it up. The amount of headaches and time that goes into like rehabbing a home that has had those chemicals cooking, I mean, you pretty much have to gut the thing and rebuild it from on the inside, and then of course those things blow up and they can do some real damage. But the point is if you see this type of activity, somebody's arrested for this type of stuff, it really allows you to deal with the stuff on the front end as much as possible before it escalates to larger and larger things. And it's just a good addendum to have. So read through this, look at the terms. These are all, I think this is a pretty standard document across the board, but double check for your area, make sure that there's not specific ordinances that you need to include in this. There's usually, in the multifamily side, there's a program, usually in most major cities for sure, called Safe Streets, and they can be a great resource as well for this specific addendum and a lot of other safety and crime related type things that will help you as a landlord. They provide trainings, very, very beneficial. Whoops, let me pull that back over there. Okay. Drug-free, crime-free. Every move-in packet. Okay, next addendum that we are dealing with, the pest control addendum. So there's a couple different pest control addendums that you could use. All right, this first one is really just, is this one a house? Well, so I have one for houses and I have one for apartments. And the way that I generally treat houses is that in our addendums, we basically tell people that if in the first 3 weeks there's any sign of pest control activity, we'll come out and treat, we'll take care of it. After that, it's their responsibility, because largely speaking, pest control activity in a home is caused by usually there's certain things that just happen. There's ants in some areas, there's just scorpions, it's seasonal and so forth. But like roaches and sometimes fleas and some of those other pests are largely created by animals and trash and things that the residents do and not keeping a clean home, things along those lines. So in homes, generally speaking, it's on the resident. In apartments, it's a little different because usually you're talking about a shared type building where there's multiple residents in their own apartments, and the trash and living conditions of one that would draw in pests of whatever it is can then creep into apartments. So most times there's some sort of obligation on the landlord to run through at the very least a preventative type treatment, and that is a different type of addendum. So if you're using a house, and both of these are going to be in the forms vault, so check them out and use the one that works best for you. So the apartments, getting back to the apartments, you're going to be responsible for some sort of kind of recurring, some sort of specific treatment. Now, if the pest control company goes into an apartment and says, well, these roaches are actually caused by this person having all this trash or this buildup of whatever, then you can charge that back to that particular resident. But another thing to look out for, which we have an addendum for too, is bed bugs. And in the bed bugs, in the apartment world, a lot of times where I have seen bed bugs come from is someone will get them, they will throw their furniture out by the dumpster, and another tenant will go out and grab that furniture and bring it right back in, or a chair or something in the trash. I've seen bed bugs transferred so many times that way, it's insane. But this addendum here, it really talks about, some of the preventative ways on there, what the responsibilities are. And these days, since, and this actually talks about roaches, ants, caterpillar ants, termites, mice, or rats as well. Mice and rats, or mice especially, are another once you get a mice infestation, talking about a lot of damage. Bed bugs and mice, extremely expensive to treat if not dealt with early on. And that's really the point of these addendums, saying, hey, listen, these are your responsibilities to report. This is what's going to happen if you don't report. This is when we can charge you. This is when we're not going to charge you. All of those different things. And sometimes, depending on the addendum, like this one here says, tenants received attached pest control tips, and will read and follow the guidelines within the document. And then I actually believe that actual document's in the forms vault as well. It's like a bed bug pamphlet, which gives some really great information about bed bugs. If you're not familiar with them, you should read it and check it out. There's different ways to treat them. The best way I've ever really seen that was actually effective most of the time is a heat treatment. I'm not a pest control expert. This is just just based on my experience of what I've seen, the chemicals, they'll move them around, they'll kill them if they touch them, but a lot of times what I see is it's multiple chemical treatments. The most effective way I ever see is those heat treatments. They are more expensive, but if you get bed bugs, consult with your pest control company, see how bad it is, and then when and where possible, try to charge it back to the tenant, because bed bugs are usually transferred in, unless it's coming from another apartment. Bed bugs are usually transferred in on something they've done, something they've brought in. So there's our pest control and bed bug addendum. If you like it and you want to use it and incorporate it as part of your lease, it is there for you, along with the supporting manuals and pamphlets and all that fun stuff in the forms vault. Okay, the mold addendum. So I like the mold addendum. Reason being is because a lot of people make a really big deal out of mold. It can be a big deal, but the thing about mold is everywhere. Certain states, far more. And the thing that really kind of drives me batty about the mold argument is that a lot of times mold is, well, almost all times mold is caused by spores that are in the air, mold spores that are in the area, but untreated sources of moisture and water. So if something's leaking, and then you combine that with the heat, the combination of the spore, the water, and the heat usually causes growth. So for example, where I'm in Arizona, there's molds here, but it's not near as much of a problem as it is like in a place like Texas, a lot more humid environment there, or in Kansas. But the thing is, there's just mold everywhere. And what will happen a lot of times is the tenant will go get those little home tests, and they'll put it in, and then they'll send that thing off, and the company will be like, yep, you got mold. Well, and this is the type of mold, but it doesn't give a lot of really good information. And what it does is it kind of freaks the tenant out. And then they start coming after you saying, got mold, this is why I'm sick, this is what's going on. And so this addendum kind of outlines the responsibilities of the tenant and the landlord as it comes to mold. On the approach, this isn't really meant to kind of get in how to treat mold, but I think the important thing is that if mold is found out, go figure out where the source is, deal with the source. If you are going to have it tested, get an actual company that knows what they're doing, local company that can test the spore count in the air. And then what that can do is it can tell you the concentrations, and it can tell you the type of mold, and it can tell you if it's dangerous or harmful to people at the levels it is currently at. And I know that one of the treatments we did is a vacant home, and it was one we actually purchased. We knew there was a mold issue, and we did the remediation, and we cleaned out the air vents and the whole 9 yards, and we had it tested, and it was still a fairly decent mold spore count in there, and they pretty much said it was residual, but they had like a smoke treatment, a smoke bomb treatment almost, that killed a lot of that off and brought it back down into, and it wasn't even a harmful mold. It was just, it probably have been asthma inducing or, allergy inducing type effects, and we didn't want that. So whatever that treatment was killed it off. So the home tests, panics, don't buy into that. Media has perpetuated that, especially in the past with the black mold, which is dangerous stuff. There are dangerous molds out there, but most of it is not. So just deal with it like anything else. Treat the major issue. If you have to get it tested by the right person and get the real information. This mold addendum will help outline what those obligations are to the tenant, steps that need to be taken, things along those lines. This particular one actually gives some basic information: moisture problems, responsible for mold growth, check out any indoor moisture problems, humidifiers. A lot of times we get mold calls in a bathroom, maybe on the wall or whatever else. There are certain ways to treat that as well. But yeah, read through this. I recommend using the mold addendum in your lease packet to cover yourself. A lot of information on what to look for and how mold is grown. So this is more of an educational document just as much as it is a kind of a cover your basis document as a landlord. It also outlines in here, just as I'm briefly going through here, is that if they let a mold problem get out of hand, and I've seen it, they haven't reported it, and I don't know if they did it on purpose or not purpose, whatever, but the case is they didn't report it, they got out of hand, led to remediation issues, well, the tenant's responsible for that. So that's why a mold addendum is absolutely useful and helpful to you as a landlord. Okay, I think those were the big ones. We do have there's a lot of addendums out there, and there's a whole section on addendums, and I think there's 30 or 40 different addendums. I mean, they can get very, very, very specific in here. So here's some other examples of one: cosigner agreements, cosigner addendums, additional roommates, smoke-free, which actually I think is probably one we should have pulled into this as part of the standard packet these days, especially with not just cigarettes, but the increased use and acceptable use of marijuana, vaping. All of that stuff causes real damage to the homes in terms of odors permeating the walls, the flooring and paint and so forth. So it's my recommendation as a landlord: don't let somebody smoke in your home. It's not going to turn out well for you. Satellite dish addendums, a lot of times you're just saying that you can't install them on the house, you can't install them on the roof, you have to have written permission before we allow one. Swimming pool. If you have a swimming pool, there's some certain things you probably want to address. Hot tub, things along those lines. Who's going to be responsible for, the weekly treatment of that, responsibility for reporting if things get out of hand, repairs, whatever those are usually outlined in a swimming pool addendum. Again, there's copies of these in the forms vault. These are very specific, so I didn't want to open up every single addendum that exists. We'd be here for years. But those are some more of the more common ones, and sometimes they get extremely specific. Okay, here is something we definitely need to talk about: is lead-based paint disclosure. Now, this is important. If your home was built prior to 1978, it is very, very likely that there is lead in the paint that was used. Even if it's the original cone, even if it's been painted 10 times over, there's probably lead in your home somewhere. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to treat that, but you have to make renters aware, and this is not just renters, it's for home buyers, home sellers as well, but you have to disclose your knowledge of the situation in writing, and you have to provide a pamphlet per EPA, per law. So again, it applies to homes built before 1978. You have to provide any known information on the presence of lead-based paint. So if you don't know if there's lead-based paint there or not, there's some things you can mark here, and we'll open up this form and take a look at it. But basically what you're saying is that you are saying what you know about it is a home was built before 1978. If you don't know anything else, you haven't run any tests, that's fine, but you are at least telling them it's built before 1978. There's probably lead there. You don't know where it is, you haven't had it tested, but there's probably lead there, so you need to be aware. You have to provide them the lead pamphlet, which we'll take a look at, and then we need to keep those signed forms for a minimum of 3 years after that person moves out. So just hold on to those documents. And then what's nice about this, though, is that you only really need to have it signed at the initial lease. So if somebody lives there 5 years, as long as they signed one of these when they first moved in, that's all you really have to worry about in terms of, you don't have to sign a new one every time you do a lease renewal. So that is nice. Let's see, I think I have a second slide on this. Yeah, let's look at the actual form first here, the forms. And so what I do on these is I will take a form for a house, and I will actually take a yellow highlighter, and I will highlight the areas specific for that house that need to be initialed and signed. The reason being is because, as we'll see here in a minute, these can be audited by the EPA, and I don't want to mess anything up, and I don't want to have to think about for this house, what do I need to sign every single time, because it'll take a minute. You have to put some thought into this. So let's just kind of look at this real quick. Leaseor is you, leasee is the person moving in. So there's a couple things you need to address here. Presence of lead-based paint and or lead-based paint hazards. This is the section. Which of these apply? There is known lead-based paint and or lead-based paint hazard present in the housing. If you know that there is known lead-based paint, you've had it tested or whatever else, then you're going to initial here and you're going to explain yourself. Okay? If this house is just simply, or this apartment or whatever, this dwelling is just simply not built before 1978, but you have no other knowledge that there is lead-based paint, then you will sign off here. So you'll just initial. So what I do is I take a yellow highlighter, and if this is what it is, I'll just highlight this with yellow. And I'll actually write copy in the yellow highlighter here too. And the reason I do that is because when I make a photocopy of it, it doesn't copy over. But if you're just printing it off, you know, you can just highlight. I mean, just this, there's a Word document version, just highlight and lead-based paint disclosure for 2101 Main Street. Highlight, this is the one you're going to initial. Now, if you checked one, I believe, records and reports available to leaser. Okay, if you check that there is known lead-based paint, what is the next thing here? Leaser has provided the leasee with all available records and reports pertaining to lead-based paint and or lead-based paint hazards in the housing list below. If you've checked one, there is lead-based paint, then you would initial here. If you don't know of anything and you have no reports or records pertaining, then you initial here. So you see what I mean? You have to like think this through logically, and that's why I just keep one, because I don't want to do this every single time and really kind of go through that mental grind. If I just highlight the ones for that particular house, I know I have it right every single time. Now, the leasee side of it, what they have to do is they have to initial one of these. Leasee has received copies of all information listed above. So if you actually have some information, some reports or so forth, and you've given it to them, they have to sign off that they've received those. They have to initial. If you don't have those, that's fine. There's nothing there. Leasee has received the pamphlet to protect your family from the lead in your home. That is required. That is a required document that you have to give them. This is a copy of that document. You can download these from the EPA website. Either print them off, email them, whatever else. But it's a 20-page pamphlet basically educating them on lead-based paint, what it can do, the hazards, how it can affect children. It can really mess kids up. So it's very important that you have this, because I mean, if you don't issue this stuff and a child in your home gets lead-based paint poisoning and ends up with a long-term mental issue, disability, things along those lines, then you are in some big trouble. So the leasee needs to highlight one of these, and again, to initial one of these, and again, I highlight the one that is that they have to do. That way, again, if there are copies of reports. So if there are copies of the reports, they have to initial both of these, because you're still responsible of giving them the pamphlet as well. And then agent's acknowledgement, you are basically, if you are acting as an agent for owner, the agent has informed the leasor's obligation. So if you're a real estate agent basically, or a property manager or whatever, this is an extra additional initial thing that the property manager has to. So the property manager can have these initialed because they're acting as agent. So they can initial them for the leasor, the property owner, because they're acting as agent. The leasee has to initial, and then the property manager has to initial as well. And then here's the signatures. Leasor, leasee, agent. You sign for the leasor. Leasee signs. Agent signs. You're the agent. Have one of these. Have one of these in your packet for any home built before 1978. Extremely important. So here's why. Fines, penalties, they can charge you up to $16,000 per violation. If there is an actual real case and you don't give them this, if you don't give them and have them sign off on this in the correct way, and there ends up being an issue and there's lead-based paint poisoning and it affects a child or whatever else, you can be sued by the tenant. And again, it's criminal fines, maybe even jail time, depending on the amount of negligence. Especially if you know that there's lead-based paint in there and you didn't disclose it, big trouble. So I have a little story that we dealt with here, and what I think what's important to note about at least the agency within the EPA that kind of manages all this, at least at the time for sure. It's been a while since I dealt with them, but they are funded by the fees and the fines that they levy against landlords. And so in Kansas, with our property management company, we had an EPA agent, didn't even know we existed. They were actually in town looking at something else and was driving by our office and our big sign, property management company. They stopped. They just stopped. They came and walked in, said, hey, I'm with the EPA and we are going to do an audit of your files right now to ensure that you have the proper lead-based paint disclosures for any house built before 1978. You must give us access. And we had to. We called our attorney real quick. Not a big deal. I mean, we followed this stuff, but we called attorney real quick, made sure that we're good, nothing that we needed to do. He said, yep, absolutely, you have to. I said, okay, here we go. Gave him a conference room, gave him access to the files, and he went to work. So he went through our files, you know, he pulled random files, he looked for the homes that were built before 1978, some were. We had everything in line. We had this disclosure, we had the most up-to-date disclosure and the most up-to-date pamphlets, because every year when they were released, we would go through and make sure we had the latest versions of them. And he comes back in the final assessment letter, or he told us right on site that everything looked good except that we are using an outdated version of the form. And it just so happened to be that I knew we weren't. I think it was within a couple months of me downloading and getting this all updated and stuff. And I said, no. I was like, this is when we downloaded them. This is the one we're using. And then I went onto their website and I showed them the form we were using was the exact form that was on the website and available to us to download. And so he did actually note that, you know, we downloaded from there, but then they issued like a final findings letter and tried to fine us $10,000 for using an outdated form. That was their decision. The form that we got from the EPA website that was outdated on their site, we used. It was the latest one available. They still tried to fine us. It was literally $10,000. And he said that we were lucky it wasn't more, because he found a lot of instances of us using the wrong forms, and he could have charged us $10,000 for each one. He just did one charge, and he thought that was reasonable. So, you know, we did the whole thing, went through the whole process and responded and showed him proof. And it was funny because at that point in time, if I remember correctly, we had evidence that, you know, it was, because I mean, when he said that, we went right there on the website and documented everything. But even at the time we got that letter, like 2 or 3 months later when we were fighting this, the document still hadn't been updated. And so we showed him again that, hey, at this time it was outdated. It is still outdated on your website. This is the form that we're using. Sorry, this isn't on us. If you tell us to use your forms and it's outdated, then how can you charge us? And they did back off of it, but it was like 4.5, 5 months. Again, they weren't hassling us the whole time, but it took them 4 or 5 months to get all of that cleared in a final letter saying, you're right, you know, we're gonna basically reverse the charge, you know, but make sure to use the right form as you move forward, that type of stuff. And I don't even remember if when they updated it from there. I checked again the following year, but you know, it just goes to show that this stuff can get out of hand quick. And if we weren't on top of it, all of a sudden you're fighting off a $10,000 fine from some random guy just stopping by. Now, as if you're just a single family property owner, things along those lines, you may not necessarily deal with it in that type of situation. But if there is a tenant whose child ends up getting lead-based paint poisoning from a home that was built before 1978, and they're diagnosed with that, and there's some issues, when they come to investigate that, when that lawsuit comes, they are going to want to make sure to see this. And if you don't have this, you are going to be dealing with some major stuff that you do not want to deal with. It is not pretty. It is not fun. Okay, so that's kind of touching on the main things I like to have in my lease packet, and here's just kind of a recap of it. So what I do is we have that welcome or that new move-in folder, and for us with a property management company, it was a blue folder, and we put just one of our stickers on there and, you know, made it nice and official and everything. But even just a folder, just something to organize this stuff in. And what we would do is we put the the new resident welcome letter in. We'd put a signed copy of the lease agreement, or just a copy of the lease agreement. I mean, it wasn't even necessary it had to be signed. It's just a copy of the lease agreement. If they wanted signed, that's fine. But a lot of times when they're moving in, we would turn this stuff over on site. So it's not like we had a copier there. So there would be a copy of them for them. Now, for us, we use a property management software, and we would upload the signed lease to the portal so it would have access and could have if they wanted, but we always put an extra copy in there for them to review if they have any questions. The animal agreement, the lead-based paint disclosure, drug-free, crime-free, and just put all of these things in there. Some of the other things that we did is, if we were given any type of move-in gifts in the form of gift cards, maybe we'd put them in there, and we'd tell them, hey, there's gift cards in here or something. Hey, check in here, as a thank you, we put some stuff in there. Don't throw it away. Maybe coupons to local restaurants around there. And a lot of times, especially with apartments, but a lot of times if you're in an area with some restaurants or some different bars, clubs, entertainment venues or whatever, and you say, hey, listen, do you have any interest advertising our move-in packet? Would you like to give some coupons or some information away? A lot of times they would, especially with apartment communities. But you can put coupons in, you can put area maps, highlighting stuff that is around where access to highways are, grocery stores, whatever. Takeout menus, that's another thing. Neighborhood information, like I said, what's to eat, where access is, where the parks are, what's cool about the neighborhood, things along those lines. And then we also like to have, if possible, and this is probably easier for if you just own a couple houses, a lot easier for you than it is a property management company, one that like manages a lot of properties, because you have to prepare individual ones, and usually the homes are all unique. But instructions for the mechanical devices, you couldn't believe, and maybe even experience this, how often we've gotten emergency calls, after hours emergency calls for no heat, no AC, something along those lines. And it comes down to simple fact that maybe the thermostat was programmed to shut off at a certain time and they just didn't know how to operate it. So operations of mechanical devices, where shutoffs are located, what to do in the case of a toilet leak, which you can have in your welcome letter as well, turning off that angle stop or whatever to shut the water off in the case of a leak, things along those lines. So instructions for mechanical devices, extremely helpful there as well. Okay, kind of working down, we've got through kind of the new move-in paperwork on our list. Let's just see where that is at. We got that prepared. Okay, so now we're really going to start getting into, and don't worry, this we're about 37 minutes in right now, and the rest of this kind of stuff is more kind of like executing the final, the process. So we should be able to finish up our move-in process section within this video. But these next steps are really kind of what do we need to do to make sure we're prepared and get all the things lined out for the move-in. So move-in monies. What I put movies on there? Typo. Move-in monies. Making sure when you go in, did you get all the monies? What is the pro rate? Making sure to collect that. Make sure that's communicated. Make sure it's ready, that they're paying hopefully in advance on their portal. But if not, in the form of a money order, cashier's check. Don't accept credit card. Don't accept cash. Don't accept checks. Credit cards and checks can be charged back. If you're using an owner portal, an online electronic payment portal that accepts credit cards, I think a lot of them you can actually just not act. You can say I don't want credit cards. You can say just ACH payments because you don't want to charge it back in 30 days. Checks, you don't want to cancel the check. Making sure the utilities are verified. A lot of times we ask for confirmation numbers if you want. You can even call the utility company and say, hey, listen, I just need to verify this utility is turned on for this date. Here's a confirmation number. They'll say, yep, sure is. You're good. Making sure that you've received the information on renter's insurance. Did you get a copy of that policy? Are you listed on there as an additional interested party? Or what's the other one that used to be was additionally insured? But I think now it's just on those COI forms, certificate of insurance forms. It's just additional interested party, if I remember right. And what that does is if the policy cancels or changing policies, you get notification as well as the tenant. So that's how you know when policy lapses. Very important. So next what we're going to do is we are going to have that paperwork signed, and we'll take a look here in a minute on kind of some of the different ways that that can happen. We're going to deliver those resident keys. We're basically turning over possession at this point. We're giving them the remote controls. We're giving any door alarms or any of the like access codes, anything along those lines are given to them. You can include that in a welcome letter. You can include that in a packet too in writing. That's one way to do it. And then you are going to give them their move-in packet. So you're going to get the money. You're going to verify all the utilities are on. You're going to sign all the lease stuff. You're going to give them their move-in packet and then give them their keys. And then you have effectively handed over possession. So let's take a look at that kind of executing, that finalizing, that signature side of the lease agreements and getting this thing wrapped up for you in terms of getting them that possession turned over. So a couple different ways you can do it. You can meet them at the property or you can meet them at an office, depending on what you have going on. If you're a single family landlord that is you just own your own stuff, I wouldn't recommend meeting them at your home, but meet them at that home. Or if there's a restaurant or a place you can sit down and have this stuff done, then great. And that's more the traditional way. It's sitting down, it's signing everything, it's going into the house, doing the move-in, move-out inspection right there with them, taking the pictures, turning everything over to them at that point in time, and then going on about your day. That's great. I like it. It's time consuming though, and you'll spend a couple hours there, especially if you do a thorough explanation of the lease agreement and a thorough move-in, move-out inspection. And I typically like to do those off on my own just because I can get through it quicker, and then you don't have to spend 2 hours on property with them. If they have any questions, they can email them or call you, and it just seems to be quicker. They're not interrupting you and asking questions while you're trying to get that stuff taken care of. Another way I like to do is I like to send the paperwork ahead of time, a week in advance. Say, hey, listen, here's all the paperwork, review everything, let me know what questions you have. If you don't have any questions, send me a signature. We will meet up on this date. We'll get money. I'll turn over the keys. You're good to go. Of course, have your move-in inspection ready. Deliver the move-in inspection as well as part of everything else. If you're going to use a photo template, you send the photo template too so they can see, yep, I need to sign this. These are all the photos. Oh, I'm going to get a chance to make sure to do everything on here. Great. Even if they want to meet you to do the move-in inspection, have that done ahead of time. You kind of set the precedence and the standard. Yep, no problem. I'll meet you there. Here's what I have. Go on and walk the property. I'll hang out for 5, 10, 15 minutes, or you go through this, add anything you want, and we can take care of this right here and there. But at least then you've done most of the work, and they're not following you around for the next hour because you want to be as detailed as possible, of course. And it's just quicker, it's easier, it's faster. And then of course give them, I say here, a copy of the signed forms, but you don't want to give them if you're doing it on site. If you're sending it ahead of time, then you can give them signed forms because you're going to get them back, so you can make copies of them and put them in that packet. If you're meeting them at the place, of course you can't give them signed forms, so give them copies of the documents, upload the signed forms, or send them later if they actually want them. So day of move-in, wherever you're meeting, and you can collect this ahead of time too. You can say, send back the paperwork, send me back this much in your prorated rent, or however much more you owe me for move-in, day of move-in. We'll meet you over there. I'm going to give you copies of the keys. I'm going to give you my welcome pack. I'm going to give you your garage door openers, and the home's going to be yours. And you get to go from there, start rocking and rolling. So that's the two ways I like to do it. You can either meet them at the property, or you can send the stuff. Actually, one way I like to do is send everything in advance, have it done, and then get it back. That way I'm not spending 2 hours with them at the property. Again, that takes up a lot more time than it needs to. But those are the two general ways that we approach that. Whatever you're more comfortable with. Last two steps on here. Set the resident up in the software. Now, if you're not using the software, that's okay. Not a big deal. I would recommend keeping a tenant ledger though, so you can show all your payments, all your charges, all the charges to the tenant and all the payments that you receive against the charges. And then if you are using you could use stuff like Turbo Tenant, Apartments.com, Ready Rent, or some of those platforms there that are designed to keep records along those lines. Avail.co. Again, there's a whole list of these things in the resource section. Go check them out if you're interested in any of that. They're usually fairly cheap. They're designed for the single family homeowner, and it'll allow you to set them up. If they're not already set up, allows you to keep track of all this stuff. And then the final step is, for me, is I set up that hard file. I started in 2001. Paper was still very much a deal there. I don't like to do a whole bunch of paper. I absolutely love the digital stuff too, but and I do upload digital stuff, but I still like files. I still like paper files personally. And if you like paper files too, set up your file. If you do set up a file, make sure it's organized. I think maybe this kind of comes just from the property management side of things, to where it's in our interest to set things up in the same way and standardize everything so we can find information quickly when we're looking, especially when you're dealing with 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 units. But this is how we set up our file. On one side, we'd put basically all your notices, your resident correspondence, any, violations, notes, things along those lines. The other side, we'd have everything that had to do with the move-in, the application screening process, and so forth. So I would know where to look. I would put them in the same order. If I needed to see what the application looked like, I know I'd have to go down 10 forms on the right side to find it real quick. If I needed to know about, the 3-day notice we just issued, theoretically should be right on the top. If I just issued it, if I needed to see how many they did, I can look and find the 4 or 5 already issued them, if that's the case. I'm just giving crazy examples there. But point being, stay organized, and it helps you save time later. Probably not as big of a deal if you only own one home, but it's definitely less aggravating if you are trying to find information. So that is the sample file setup. Okay, so we have made it through the move-in process. I know a lot of information, but a lot of good information, maybe dry information, but if we're going to be landlords, we need to know our way around our documents. Because these are the things that protect us. They protect us from liability. They protect us in our ability to get tenants out of our property, to make sure that things are being corrected and fixed and repaired on time. Those documents are very important because that is what gives us our authority to act and make sure that our home is being protected, that rents are being paid, that they're doing what they're supposed to do. So very important. Can be dry, very important though. And the good thing about it is usually once you get familiar with your paperwork, it's not like it changes all the time. You generally know what's in your lease and what's not in your lease. So quick section recap again, we went through that move-in checklist. That's just a step of all of our processes and the way that we do it. Again, I encourage you as things, if you learn new things, if you want to try things in a different way, if you don't like the way that's sorted or you like to change the order in the way you do that, it's completely up to you. That is really a guide for you to be efficient and stay consistent from tenant to tenant. Again, the move-in process is part of that fair housing deal. Plus, it's part of the retention. If you have a process down and you're knocking this stuff out, that person coming in is going to see that you're organized, that you're professional, and that you mean business. That does make a difference in the way that they interact with you. If you're sloppy, if you're forgetting stuff and you miss this and you miss that, resident will treat you different. They just will. Okay, so we talked about that move-in inspection, where you go through, document the condition of everything, making sure having the backup with the pictures, with the video, with the lease app, something along those lines. Very important there as well. Makes it extremely easy when it comes to the move out and charging them. You can show them very clearly, well, this is what I charged you. It was like this when you moved in. It's like this when you moved out. This is what I told you I was going to charge you. Here's the ballpark amount. This is what I actually charged you. It's pretty cut and dry, very simple. There's not much argument in it, and it helps you stay professional because it's no longer a he said she said type argument. It's just, hey, it just is what it is. I'm doing my job. Simple as that. We did walk through the lease agreement, jump through a lot of those provisions and some of the things. As again, depending on your state, that may not be the end all for you, and maybe there's some provisions out there that you really like that weren't included on there. That's fine. Pop them in there. Do what works for you. Of course, have it all legally reviewed. Same with the more common lease addendums. Ones I like to have in my move-in packet, things along those lines, but there's a lot of them out there. Check out that forms vault. There's a lot of them in there. I don't even know what it's up to right now, and it just keeps growing. And some of them get extremely specific. I think there's one on like a specific type of, there's like a trailer addendum. And hey, if it wasn't an issue for someone somewhere, it wouldn't be in there. Now, having said that, doesn't mean that you have to use every single one of them. Maybe it means that if you like that trailer addendum and what it says on there, and you can just build that right into your lease just to make sure it never happens, take the verbiage, put it into your lease. That's okay too. Just because it's in your lease doesn't mean it has to apply. Like, let's say you have a house and an apartment and the trailer addendum wouldn't apply in a million years. It's okay to have it in the lease and it not apply. You know what I mean? That's almost easier than trying to, okay, well, this is a house, I'm going to use this addendum. This is an apartment, I better remember I don't have to use this addendum. You know, either way, the important deal is to have it in writing and signed off by the tenant. That's the ultimate goal we're trying for here. We looked at kind of that sample move-in packet and what that consists of, all the paperwork, the coupons, the neighborhood information, potential move-in gifts, in that folder, whatever that looks like. And then a couple of different ways, the standard ways to kind of finalize move-in, meeting them at the property, maybe sending that stuff in advance. So again, a lot of information here. We're doing great on time, sitting at about 15 minutes. So right in that, I like to do my right in that time frame I like to stay in. Okay, resources for this section. In the resource section, of course, all of these are in your forms vault, or they'll be listed below in the resource section, specifically for the move-in process. And again, just because it's in the resource section here doesn't mean that I don't have different versions of them in the forms vault as well. And there's state-specific stuff for some of this stuff too. So make sure to look at the forms vault, I guess is what I'm saying. So in this one though, everything that we reviewed, everything that we looked at in this video will be below. So the new move-in checklist, the welcome letter, the move-in inspection template, all of those documents will be attached for quick and easy access for you below. And then, yep, okay. That's it. That is what we have for the move-in process. So again, I hope this was helpful. Thank you for joining us today or evening or whenever you're watching this. Make sure to join us for our weekly kind of live coaching Q&A call. If you have any questions on any of this, go peruse that forms vault for more resources. Join us over in our members section. Of course, our members community as well. If you have any questions, you can hit me up and find me there, or hit up other members and find them there. And yeah, so get your move-in packet. Have what you want all set up as kind of a standard, and then that way when you get your new move-in, it's as easy as just printing off, filling it out and printing it off. That way you don't have to go kind of figure out, oh, what do I want to use this time? Keep it consistent, figure out what you want your packet to be, put it together, that template version of that move-in packet, and have it ready for your next move-in. And then as you learn, as you grow, as you want to add stuff, remove stuff, add it and remove it. That's the way this works. So thank you once again. We will go on and wrap it up and let you get on with your day or evening. This is Jason with the Landlord Launch, and we will see you in the next section, which we will start dealing with resident management, resident retention, the maintenance management process, rent collections, evictions, all those things that we have to work with the resident during the course of their lease. So see you there.